Welcome to Impact Makers Radio, helping you to find jargon-free information before choosing a professional to help solve your problems and live the life you love. And here's your host, Stuart Andrew Alexander.
Hi and welcome to another Let's Talk Divorce conversation. And on this segment of the show, ladies and gentlemen, we finally have writer and family law attorney Robin DesCamp, principal of DesCamp Legal Services, all the way from Portland, Oregon. Now, Robin, who is considered to be somewhat of an authority in the area of family law, is here today to talk to you about understanding the pitfalls of nasty litigation tactics. Now, that sounds like a really interesting topic. So, if you are one of the increasing numbers of individuals in the Portland, Oregon area, and you feel that today's topic may be relevant to your situation, then it may just be a good idea for you just to, take a break, log out of Facebook, stop the Twittering and the Instagramming or anything else you happen to be doing that may cause a distraction. And you might even want to grab a notepad and pen and get ready to take some notes as we listen in to what Robin has to share with us today. So with that said, let's not keep her waiting any longer. She's a very busy lady. Welcome to the show, Robin.
Thank you very much for having me.
You are so welcome, my dear. So we have about 15 or 20 minutes or so with each other. So let's just jump feet first in. Let's make the best use of our time. In your own words, of course, Robin, describe the kinds of people who you serve and the various types of situations they find themselves in when they come to you for your help.
Well, thank you again for having me. And I would say that generally I see people who are obviously seeking a divorce from their spouse. And because I have a very limited practice, I try to keep my number of clients down. I don't have associates or assistants or anything. So people come to me who are seeking a divorce, and I have a reputation for only working with clients who are not interested in waging war. So I'm lucky enough to have clients self-select me based on my amicable business model and my refusal to engage in what I like to call the pit bull tactics of ugly divorce litigation.
Mm-hmm. So with that said then, Robin, now that we have an idea of who you help, who you work with on a day-to-day basis, it must be said that anything you share with us today is not legal advice or legal assistance. It's purely for the purposes of sharing information. Now, can you just expand on that in your own words then, Robin, just so that everybody is clear?
Right. So what I'm here to do today, to the extent I offer any advice at all, it's just meant to be general advice on ways to navigate through your divorce, but I'm not able to give legal advice in a radio interview or a podcast, and I'm only allowed to give advice here in Oregon. So this is just what I like to think of more of as a conversation.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing that, Robin. So with that said, when you think about the people who you help, what's the most common, and I'm sure there are so many that you could share with us today, however, we are limited by time, but what's the most common misconception you come across while you're helping them on a day-to-day basis?
So that's a great question, because I think that one of the most common misconceptions in the realm of divorce is that a person should hire a lawyer who has a reputation for being I used the phrase pit bull earlier, or they say that they want an aggressive divorce attorney. And when people come to me and tell me that, or even if it's just a friend and not a potential client, usually that desire to hire an aggressive lawyer is coming from an emotional place and not a wise financial place. And the fact is that when you do hire an attorney who has a reputation for being aggressive and contentious, you almost always will pay in two different ways, but significantly both. One is emotional and one is financial. And the fact is that the aggressive lawyers are the ones who will spend the most time dragging your case out. Often they work in conjunction with the lawyer on the other side. So we hear a lot about collusion in the news these days, but this is, I've seen actual collusion between opposing counsel. And the idea is to generate as much misery and as much anger as possible so that the two clients end up spending months or in some cases even years battling over things that are really inconsequential. Because in many states here in the United States, a divorce will generally result, depending from, where you live, in a 50-50 division of the assets. And then there are issues to be explored regarding, say, spousal support, child support, or custody. But what the pitbull lawyers and the aggressive lawyers are really good at is they're really good at getting people to argue and fight over things that will end up being divided 50-50 anyway at the end of the day.
So with that said then, Robin, when you, again, think about the people who you help, and obviously keeping their confidentiality in mind, please share an example of how you have helped. Now, I understand, as you said at the beginning, you work with exclusive clients. You don't work with everybody, but please share an example of how you have helped, or even how you would go about helping somebody who came to you with that challenge, those misconceptions that you just described, and what kind of transformational results you would be able to gain for them.
If there's anybody listening right now that's really upset and angry at their spouse, soon to be ex-spouse or ex, and it's the following analogy is when people come to me and they say, I know that your paradigm is for a peaceful divorce, and I'm sure some people are capable of that, but I'm not, and here's why. And it's, unfortunately, it almost always comes down to issues of the heart, related to infidelity and things like that. And they say, but I want an aggressive lawyer. I want a nasty litigation because I want to make him pay or make her pay. And when they have children, which is usually the case when people come to talk to me, I ask them to imagine that they've sat down, to have a picnic beside a train tracks, and they can see that their child is playing near the train track, and here comes the train. And I ask them, if you know that you have the opportunity to save your child's life and push them away from the train, but that you will die, what would you do? And 10 times out of 10, every person, absolutely says, well, of course I would die for my child. And I say, you would die for your child, but you won't have a peaceful divorce for them. And it really helps bring home the point that it's not that difficult to take your pain and your anger and your anxiety and your fear and resolve that, say, with the help of a professional therapist or with wine with your girlfriends, or take it out at the gym. But when you confuse your anger over the end of the marriage with the financial end of the marriage, then you end up, you lose all your money and you lose your kids. Your kids really suffer. So I have helped take people from that point of wanting to destroy their spouses to a peaceful point and saying, you're only going to hurt yourself and your kids. You're not just going to hurt them.
I just want to underpin what you just shared with us, and especially in relation to the impact that it has on the children. My main reason for starting this particular series, Let's Talk Divorce, is, as you said yourself, I also was a child of divorce, and it was a very volatile, it was violent, there was lots of blood, there was lots of arguing, lots of conflict, and I experienced that as an 8-9-year-old child, and didn't have the resources to be able to kind of figure out, what was going on. So I ended up, long story short, carrying the guilt of my parents' breakup. I thought it was my fault, and I carried that through my teenage years, through my years as a young man, and way up until my mid-30s. It wasn't until then that I discovered the resources that I could use to deal with the psychological impact of all of that. So for the listeners out there, and especially for those people in the area of Portland, Oregon, if you are, as Robin alluded to, if you do find yourself really angry, and you may rightly so have every right to be angry, love your children more than you hate each other at this particular moment in time, because the impact, the negative impact, I just cannot describe that. I'm 55 years old today as we're speaking, And still, even though I've developed the resources to be able to deal with that, it still reveals its ugly head now and again, and I really have to sit down and think about it and deal with that. So it has a lifetime negative impact when you do argue, fuss and fight. And what Robin is saying or shared with us so far today, and her topic today is just spot on. So sorry, I'm stealing your show. You're the star of the show, but I just wanted to share that with the listeners as well, Robin.
Well, your perspective is important, and I can tell you that from my perspective as a child of, honestly, 2 really painful divorces, these are things that you carry with you well into adulthood. And I felt sometimes like I was a child soldier in a war that I never signed up for. And those emotional scars, you don't just bring them into your adulthood, you carry them into your future relationships with either loved ones in a romantic sense, in your relationships with your children, with your coworkers. I've been doing work on myself for years and discovered that some of the patterns that I had developed in order to cope with the ugliness of my parents' divorces were really unhealthy. And I think that I had developed those patterns, in essence, to sort of protect myself, because I didn't want to go through that war that I had lived through, so many years ago. And it's always great to get a good therapist and help. They can help you sort of understand how being put in that position can really impact you. But this is why I tell people, I just had a meeting yesterday with a lovely gentleman who is considering divorce. He's very concerned that his wife is going to be contentious and ugly about it. And he said he wants to wait another 3 years until his daughter graduates from high school. And I said, that's what my parents did. And it was horrible, because I realized, of course, when I entered college my freshman year and then suddenly the marriage was over, I realized that they had just been waiting for me. And then I sort of spun out of control, but I wasn't at home. I was away in a new city with new people. And, you really have to consider the impact of making choices that you think might be good for your kids, but in reality, they may be the opposite.
As a reminder, ladies and gentlemen, my guest today is writer and family law attorney Robin DesCamp, principal of DesCamp Legal Services in Portland, Oregon. And she's here today talking about understanding the pitfalls of nasty litigation tactics. Now, with that in mind then, Robin, and for those people who are listening in right now, what's one of the many pitfalls, or let's say misguided truths, that they need to be aware of no matter what situation they find themselves in?
I think that a common mistake that people make when they get divorced is they don't open this is going to sound really basic, they don't open their legal bills. And so when you get a bill from your credit card company, most of us will open it up, take a look, make sure that everything in there makes sense, and then we'll pay our bill. And if there's something that should be contested, then we'll do so. What people do when they're getting divorced is they see that envelope coming in from their attorney's office, and that envelope automatically, I think for a lot of us who've been through a divorce, it sort of creates fear and revulsion and conjures up sad feelings. So we just open the bill, we look at the bottom, whatever the total is, and we pay it. And the problem with that is that there are a lot of sort of secret billing techniques that clients don't know about that the lawyers who are unscrupulous will use to drive up their clients' fees. And for example, if your lawyer seems really, really, really busy and is doing a lot of things supposedly on your behalf, and you're not really reading those legal bills carefully, you might not know that none of these things really make sense in your case. And I'll give you a good example. I know a woman whose lawyers spent tens of thousands of dollars interviewing and hiring private detectives to follow her unfaithful husband. Well, here in Oregon and in every other state in the union now that New York has joined the party, it's no fault, right? So we don't get to litigate our pain and our misery because the judge doesn't care. The judge doesn't care if you're stooping your secretary or you're seeing someone else. Mm-hmm. The judge is going to make the financial decisions if you end up having a judge make those decisions, which is the unfortunate case in about 4 or 5% of the cases that go to trial. But this woman had spent tens of thousands of dollars to have her husband followed around and have photos of him taken with his mistress. It doesn't do anybody any good. But the lawyer knew that if she hired the private detective to prove that the husband was unfaithful, her client would be angry and she would want to spend a lot more money on legal fees because she would want to get him. And at the end of the day, in this divorce, she ended up getting 50% of the marital estate. That was it. But she spent close to $1 million in legal fees.
Wow.
That was a big case.
I bet that was. Thanks for sharing that, Robin. That's, wow. But let's just be clear about this. We're talking about the minority of attorneys out there, right? We're not talking about the majority of attorneys hiking up the fees for their clients, right?
Well, I'm not going to gain a lot of friends in the divorce attorney community when I say what I'm going to say, but there's a reason that I bill my clients on a flat fee basis, on a sliding scale flat fee basis per quarter, and that is the billing. You can call them irregularities, you can call them mistakes, or you can call them what I call them in some cases, and it's just outright indulgences by attorneys that can happen, especially during a divorce when people aren't paying attention to their legal fees. It's so widespread, and there's a tendency among divorce counsel, I believe, to overbill their clients, to do work for them that they don't necessarily need. And that has been my experience. I have one of the services that I offer to people is I do what I call a divorce autopsy. So I'll look at their legal fees from a case that is already over. And I'll say, okay, here's where I spot, $15,000 that you never should have spent. And sometimes they'll go back to their attorney or to the state bar to do a fee, to sort of relitigate what the fee was and try to get a refund. But I mean, I'm not going to make a lot of friends here. I mean, here in Portland, I have a very few friends in the divorce bar because I've been writing about the subject for years, and I've done enough research to know, and I've looked at enough case files to know that there does seem to be a motivation on the part of many divorce lawyers. I can't say the majority, but that's why it's so important that a client will manage their divorce from the very beginning. And I mean from the beginning when you are going in for what we call the initial consult. There's all sorts of homework that a prospective client can do prior to that consult so that they go in and they know what they should be listening for, things that should make them feel confident in their attorney and things that should make them not feel confident. You start managing your divorce from the very beginning and all the way through the end, and you won't fall into these traps of letting your case get away from you. And it's what I believe is responsible case management starts not just with the attorney, but with the client. And the inherent struggle for the client is that they just want to throw it all, at their attorney because they can't handle it because it's so sad.
Right.
They're trying to deal with the shifting paradigm of their family, but if you don't manage your case, then you may end up with a real problem on your hands.
So share a few of those quick fire bullet points of what somebody could do to manage their case before speaking with an attorney.
Absolutely. So if you start at the very beginning, when you seek, as a lawyer in a small town, I'm often asked for divorce attorney referrals, and I always ask them, so what are your goals, et cetera, and I'm always surprised when people tell me that they have hired counsel in the past based on recommendations, say, well, that person's a member of my gym or that person's a member of my golf club. And if you start your process by asking your friends for referrals and you say, I want somebody who's really smart but also has a good soul, I know it sounds a little bit kind of nutty when you're looking for a divorce attorney who's also a good person. But one of the things that it's important to look out for when you're meeting with your attorney for the first time is, are they telling you things that you think they actually believe, or are they telling you things that you think they want you to believe because that's what you want to hear. So, for example, if you go in and you see an attorney and they tell you, I'm going to get you 80% of the marital estate and we're going to grind him into the dust and you'll get full custody of the kids and he'll get no visitation. Unless you're talking about an extremely rare set of circumstances, that attorney is promising you the moon because this is his sales pitch. Now, if you're with a good attorney, they're going to say, okay, now we're going to work through your case and I'm going to do the best job I can for you. And I want, to cooperate with you and I'm going to be open and transparent about my billing practices, et cetera. But beyond that, once you hire an attorney, one of the most important things to do is to understand what the fee agreement says. So, for example, people, and again, it's a painful situation. So, people will leave an attorney's office and they'll sign the fee agreement, and they won't even look at what it really says. And one thing that I've noticed is a really, I think, despicable trait recently is that attorneys will charge what they call a minimum billing unit. So here in Portland, what I have seen are minimum billing units of up to 0.5, which means if a lawyer reads an email from you and your email says, hey, counsel, I'll see you at the courthouse at 4 p.m., your lawyer charges you 0.4. That's 24 minutes to read your email. Then the lawyer writes back and says, yes, I'll see you at 4 p.m. Then they charge you 0.4 for that. So you just got billed for almost an hour of time for what's essentially 30 seconds of work. And in my business where I do autopsies of legal files, this is the number one way that clients get absolutely driven into horrible trouble with their legal bills. And when I worked for a law firm several years ago, I was criticized for not using those minimum billing units, going back and forth on things as simple as emails or listening to voicemails. And so that minimum billing unit is one of the other things to watch out for, is an interest amount that they're going to tack on to balances going forward. So I recently reviewed a fee agreement here in Portland by one of the most notorious law firms for ugly divorces. And their fee agreement called for a 20% interest charged monthly. Now think about that. Most firms, most reputable firms, will charge you the statutory rate of interest. But these people charge 20%. And of course, it's then automatically in their interest to keep your bills high and to keep generating them. So not only are they making a lot of money off you in straight fees, but they're making a lot of money off you in interest, which is, if you want to be make money in interest, you should be a hard money lender, but not divorce counsel.
Let's imagine it's any day of the week then, Robin, and it's 5, 6, 7 a.m. in the morning, you're waking up out of bed, and you have a full day's work ahead of you helping your clients who need help with their divorce process. When you're able to help these people, to help your clients, to create that transformation they were looking for when they initially reached out to you, when you're able to make that happen, how does that make you feel?
Oh, it's one of the best feelings in the world. I'll tell you, I work with people from all sorts of different economic areas. I have some very wealthy clients, and I have some clients who are absolutely not. And as long as I'm able to do something for them that feels right, not just for my client, but for the family, I just, it's the best feeling in the world. I was reading a quote from a philosopher the other day, and the essence of which is it's just so much more rewarding to give than to receive. And I have made lifelong friends out of several of my clients. And I've got one client now who, I don't go a day without talking to him and to his fiance. And it just, it's the most rewarding work I've ever done. And that's why I'm so excited that, with hopefully when my book is published, I'll be able to help all the people that I wouldn't have the opportunity to meet with personally. But I can say that it's, when I previously had practiced in the corporate in-house arena, and there was nothing emotionally satisfying about that work. And so although this work can be very difficult, and although it can really strain your emotional resources at times if you really care about your clients, it can be enormously rewarding as well.
A great sense of purpose, I would imagine.
Right.
Right. So spend a brief moment telling us a little bit about your backstory then, Robin, and especially your formal education and your experience as it relates to the topic of family law.
Well, I was born in Portland, Oregon, and I went to college at University of Oregon. So I'm an Oregon girl, born and bred, and I actually attended law school here in Portland at Lewis and Clark School of Law. And initially, I started out my practice as in-house counsel. It was sort of an unusual move directly from law school into in-house counsel. Generally, those jobs are filled by people who have prior litigation experience. But I clerked as a law clerk for a manufacturing company, and I just sort of moved into their legal department after I graduated from law school and passed the bar. And so I did that for many, many years. And that gave me the background that I use now in terms of business. So I understand business, and it's often I'm working with clients who have businesses and closely held corporations, et cetera, that need to be worked out. And I also learned how to deal with a lot of different personality types when I was working for large corporations, and that really helps with my practice. But a few years ago, actually about 2 years ago, I did practice family law once briefly about 8 or 9 years ago, and I got out of the practice pretty quickly because I found it to be reprehensible. I had mentioned that employer who had chastised me for not billing enough, and there was an example once where I wrote what is actually a pretty great letter. It was a letter that laid out all the opportunities for my client for settlement, et cetera. And because I'm a writer, I tend to write pretty quickly. And my boss came into my office and he had compared my timesheets with the letter. And he said, "Why did you only bill for 2 hours for this letter?" And I said, "Because that's how long it took me to write it." Mm-hmm. And he said, No. I've read this letter. This is a really good letter. You need to charge at least 4 hours for this. So that's what led me out very quickly of family law. And the reason that I bounced back into it a couple of years ago is because I was faced with a very, very sudden overnight divorce of my own. Number two, because I'm an expert at divorce. And I had taken time off from my corporate practice to write this book about divorce based on my research and my personal experiences. And when my second husband suddenly announced that he'd rather not be married to me anymore, I had to go from being dependent on him financially to being completely independent and supporting myself and my son overnight. So we didn't have I had to do something very quickly. And I thought, okay, well, I can do divorce work. It's really not that complicated. And that's one of the things that I tell people, and you're going to have a lot of divorce lawyers listening to this who are going to be mad at me, but in the vast majority of cases, divorce work isn't that complicated. We can make it look really complicated if we want to, and we can convince our clients through fancy terms that we use on billing sheets that it's complicated, but it's not. And I was lucky enough to have a really big case drop in my lap, and my client saved me and I saved him during a difficult time for both of us. And so that's how I fell back into it. Even though I really didn't have a lot of experience, most of us divorce lawyers, we're not doing rocket science. Let's just put it that way.
So for those individuals who are listening right now, then Robin, what final thoughts would you like to share with them before we finish up with our last question for today?
I just want to impress upon people, don't take my word for it as a divorce professional or as a divorce writer. If you just listen to my voice right now, you can probably hear me maybe getting a little bit choked up. And that's because my experiences as a child did profoundly affect me in a negative way because of the divorces that I went through. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you that your children, if you're listening right now and you're angry and you want to have an ugly divorce and you think that you're getting the other side, you're going to get him or you're going to get her, the only person that you're getting are your own children. And you may not be able to see the impact that it's having on them now, but it's going to last a lifetime. So I would just beg everyone, please slow down, look at your legal bills, look and see if your lawyer is doing things that are aggressive or unintentionally driving up costs, or maybe even intentionally driving up costs. And just remember that the longer that this takes, and the more anger that goes into it, the longer it's going to take you and your kids to heal. And so I would just beg all of you to please just consider, like we tell our kids when they misbehave, you need to take a time out. And so please take a time out and look at your actions, your lawyer's actions, and ask yourself, is there a better way that I can do this that will be less harmful to my family?
I do understand that you are working on a book, or the book's coming out soon. So please share some insights surrounding that particular topic. And once you've finished sharing, telling us a little bit about your book, then share with us how people can actually get in touch with you. If there's people out there who want to know more about understanding the pitfalls of nasty litigation tactics, please share then how they will be able to get a hold of you and what would be the quickest way for them to find you.
Great. Okay. I would love to. Now, my book is not out yet. It is complete. And the title is Forget the Drama, Avoid the Trauma, Your How To and How Not To Guide to Divorce. And the book is part instruction manual with some of the advice that we've discussed, that we've been talking about here on the show, in terms of managing your attorney, managing your fees, not selecting aggressive counsel, etc. And then the other part of it, which I think makes it much more palatable to a reader going through a tough time, is that I describe my own divorce, my first divorce from my son's father, which was very amicable and easy, and then my second divorce from my second husband, and it was incredibly painful. And I admit to the reader, as I often did in my former advice blog, that I made a lot of the same mistakes that I've been counseling people against for forever. I gave in to my anger. I didn't think about long-term goals as much as I thought about how much I wanted to hurt the person. But part of the beauty of the memoir is I'm saying, look, none of us are perfect. I get it. But every day we wake up and we make a new decision. Are we going to do the right thing, or are we going to do the wrong thing? And I think that in sharing my own personal stories, and I mean, frankly, my second divorce was pretty hilarious. My ex-husband ended up moving in next door to me when I moved. So if you want to know the story about that, you'll have to buy the book.
I'm buying that book. Just on that alone, I'm buying the book.
They say Portland is a small town. It really is.
Right.
I do have a website. It's robindescamp.com. And people can always reach out to me through Facebook or Twitter. My Twitter handle is AskDesCamp. And I'm on Facebook, and I just would love to, if anybody wants to talk, I love to talk to people about this subject. I've been in the divorce reform movement for years, and I just think it's really important that we really look at this entire enterprise in a completely different way than I think, it's been going for years, which has been much more adversarial. And I tell people all the time, divorce is not a war to be won. It is a process to be survived and from which to be able to thrive.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we have been listening to divorce writer and family law attorney Robin DesCamp. Thank you so much, Robin. Thank you so much for sharing so generously and openly and honestly with us today. You have certainly demonstrated that you are a true educator, advocate, and trustworthy advisor for your client's success. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so very much. And I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today.
You're so welcome. And I'd also like to take a moment to say a big thank you to you. Yes, the lovely listener in Portland, Oregon. If you've been listening in today, thank you for taking the time out of your busy day. Thank you for joining us. It's been a very insightful and informative conversation with Robin DesCamp. Make sure you do check her out. Give her a call. Visit her website. You may even want to check her out for one of her divorce autopsies that she mentioned earlier on. That sounds like a very interesting service. Whatever you do decide to do, I am absolutely convinced that after listening to Robin today, you are going to be in good hands. So that's it for today, folks. Again, my name is Stuart Andrew Alexander, and we'll be back shortly with some more leading divorce professionals in this, our series of Let's Talk Divorce Conversations. So, until then, take care, have a great day, and we'll talk real soon.
Thank you for tuning in to Impact Makers Radio. To listen to all past, present and future industry thought leaders and trendsetters, visit us at impactmakersradio.com.